Perfect. That's perfect. All righty. Well, let me get this over here. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So I always like to start out, just quick introductions. Tell us who you guys are individually, and something about you people may not know.
I am Connor LaCour. I'm the songwriter, guitarist, vocalist for the Nocturnal broadcast.
And I'm Drew, the other guitarist in the Nocturnal broadcast.
Awesome. And so I guess first off, stellar album. Started listening to it and just listened through it all the way one time and then just kept going. I was like, man, this is so good. Gave me a lot of really good reminiscent vibes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I literally went on like a whole musical journey again because it was like it took me back to a time where I was listening to like Yo La Tango, the Shins, the Steelwells, the Decemberists. It took me way back and I was like, this is so great. So stellar job, man.
That's high praise. I personally never fully connected with Decemberists. It was one of those bands that I always thought like this band makes a lot of sense for me to like, right? But I was always like Death Cab and then like some Wilco and definitely Shins too. Like
so. Dude, it like I said, it was a lot of fun for me because obviously the Death Cab is in there. I didn't listen to Death Cab a whole lot, so that's kind of like I always appreciated the Postal Service a ton, and I obviously love what he's done as a musician. But the Postal Service or the I just spaced it. Death Cab for Cutie I didn't listen to a whole lot, so
yeah.
So let's like talk about the album a little bit. First off, was the first from the guys released?
Sorry, repeat that one. You roboted out for a sec.
Oh, my bad. What was the first single from the album that you guys from Null?
We released Good Days in I think it was December. Pretty like far out ahead of the album because we had a music video ready to go and just sort of wanted to start trickling some stuff out.
Heck yeah.
And then like more officially Lavender was the next one.
So when I first heard those two singles, I genuinely had no idea what to expect from the album, which I'm assuming was kind of the intention, right?
Yeah, that was definitely something we kind of wanted. We wanted to have something that kind of showed, like a little bit of what we did, but not really be like, hey, this is exactly what, like we're going to sound like for, a couple of the songs. We wanted to have something that's going to be pretty far stretching of, like the corners of what we did on the album.
Yeah, and I think Lavender is definitely like the furthest to one side. I wouldn't necessarily say Good Days is the furthest to the other side, but it is really cool to hear that spectrum of what you guys do.
There was some like concerted decisions there. Just like, there were a few pairs of songs that maybe we liked better. And like length is a big deal, and like how the song starts. There were one or two where I was like, well, I like this song a lot and I think it might do okay, but if someone listened to the first 30 seconds and like weren't willing to give it the full 5 minutes and 15 seconds or whatever, so
which songs are you thinking of in that?
Insomnia was the one that really came to mind, where it opens very patiently, I would say.
I think a lot of your songs open patiently, but in a good way. Because like I think the album, opening up with Snowed In, panned all the way to the right, with just this kind of like nice guitar, and then boom, the rest of the band is in. it's like it's like I said, it was I was literally like, since I was sitting here, I was like writing up a little like synopsis in my mind of what the album was, and it was like a magical opening to this journey, right? Like kind of ready to take you on a journey. And then, like I said, Lavender caught me off guard. Tell me about Lavender, because that one kind of seemed like the oddball out of like, it's a great song, but it kind of seemed like the unique one, the one that wasn't necessarily the same like all the others.
Yeah, I mean that's a um, it's very keen of you to notice that it is the oldest song in this batch of songs. Um,
Okay.
Probably by like a solid 9 months or so. Um, like its gap between any of the next couple of songs that came.
Yeah.
Um, so I think like in many ways it was sort of a transition for us into whatever realm we've sort of like stepped into from previously. Um, so I think like it, especially with some of the songs that didn't make the cut for the album, it makes sense as like the sinew between uh, some previous songs we've done and this whole batch.
Heck yeah. And with it being the first one, um, were there like, since there's 9 months between, I'm assuming some of the songs that got cut were those ones written between that time and the new batch.
Yeah, it was pretty much there was like an old batch of like four or so, 4 or 5, I would say, and then Lavender and Good Days were the only two that made it out of that, and the rest
Oh,
were
okay.
dropped just, you know, for a myriad reasons, but um yeah, it was just the one that like sort of survived. We knew that people enjoyed it and sort of knew it. And that was part of the reason why we wanted to keep it. The recording itself turned out good,
Hmm.
especially when it was sort of touched up. So yeah, we decided to keep that one in there.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting too, because there's a slight difference to the recording style. It almost sounded like with Lavender, it almost felt like it was recorded separately, but it still fit. Like I said, it was kind of cool. It was interesting to me. But with like that transition from Lavender and Good Days to the new stuff, what was it that kind of changed with your writing and getting the new batch of songs that you were preparing?
Well, a lot of it became more collaborative uh, in the early days. I mean, I'm sure Connor will have a lot, some to say about it, but this was his project that just kind of started as him by himself, and he brought on us a little bit later on, and we had our first album, we had another EP, and then with this album, we kind of really started collaborating. It became a lot more like, hey, like he would come to practice, like, hey, I have a skeleton of a song. Sometimes it would be like, I have this one riff, and we'd start writing on it, and come up with this thing that was completely different than the idea that he had shown us. I remember,
Mhm.
plenty of times he would bring a riff to us, and we'd be playing it, come up with something, and we'd get done, and he'd be like, yeah, that was like not at all the feel that I was going for, but like I'm loving it, like, and sometimes it would be like, we're gonna pocket that one away for another song because it kind of carried us away from where I wanted this idea to go. And it was great though. I mean, it really opened up I felt like it kind of opened up our doors as a band to explore like what we sound like, instead of just trying to fit inside of something, another bubble.
Yeah. And Connor, was that kind of hard at first to kind of accept the different direction?
No, I think because it was really organic. I think if
Yeah.
someone had stepped up and said, like, "Hey, man, this is cool, but we had a talk, and we think it's best if we go this direction." Like, if it
Yeah,
was
that would
that
be
sort of
pretty
situation,
yeah.
I would probably take that pretty personally. But it was really just like, um, a lot of it too was that, like Drew said, they were very like they were were very like immature ideas in that they hadn't been fleshed out in my mind.
Mhm.
And so I'd be like, here's something that feels like it could be something, but I don't know what that something is, right? And
Yeah.
so I will bring it to these people whose like musicianship and creativity I trust and respect, and like, just sort of bounce it off that wall and see what comes of it. And it, there were also times where like maybe it took that different direction, and then I steered it back toward what I was thinking. Um, but no, it was never the case of me uh, like my ego being affected by that.
And real quick with because I'm assuming like I assumed that Nocturnal Broadcast is a fairly unique name, but when I searched it in Apple Music, there's two different Nocturnal Broadcast artists. Um, one from 2018. Is that you guys as well? Is that your music previous, Connor?
Maybe I actually don't know. Um, do you know the?
The
Is it?
album is called A Pendulum Ache.
Yeah, that's us. It actually should be the same. So that's
Yeah.
unfortunate, and I will look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I was confused because I was like, it sounds similar. The vocals were the thing that I was like, I mean, it's got to be the same band, but I was like, maybe they were
Right.
just wanting to just kind of separate it. And like, I was like, I don't know why you'd want to, because the first album was really good as well, but I feel like the second album definitely took things to another level. I was like, the first one was, I don't know, I don't know how to even explain it, but this like I feel like Noel was kind of like a really cohesive album that just made sense to me.
The with the first one, I recorded my parts on top of a completely finished recorded album.
Oh, really?
It was, yeah, it was one of those things. I joined the band after like the first initial recording had taken place, and they're like, well, like we don't want to release this with like not what it's going to actually sound like, so let's add the stuff on. So yeah, it definitely the cohesiveness was not there with that one because of
Okay.
just for those, and we definitely got it together, I think, with Noel, because again it was all completely collaborative.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one of the things I'm assuming, are you guys are going to be like, who does all of the recording? Do you guys have like a producer, or do you guys do the recording yourself? What do you?
So, a pendulum ache we did completely in house, which is why there's a pretty big jump in like production quality.
Okay.
But for Null, we sort of split the difference in that we went to someone local who we are good friends with and trust, Ben Livingston, at his recording studio. We did like the bulk of the main stuff there. So like we spent a couple weekends and did the guitars and bass and drums. Did a few of the songs like live together. And then over the course of like probably the next like year plus, it was like me and Taylor, the drummer, doing stuff at our house.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, just sort of piecemeal. But
That's
that was a
that's
lot of
cool.
like vocal patches and like third and fourth guitar parts and synths and
Okay.
little bits and bobbles here and there.
Kind of the fill-in stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And whose idea, like one of the things that stands out to me most is, I guess first off, what percentage are you guys doing for guitars? Because I feel like every song, the guitars were half in one ear, half in the other, not fully, but it was awesome because I would have one guitar part over here while the other one's playing something very like, they're both almost lead guitar parts that play very well together, almost having their own melodies, but on separate and separate pans. And so I was just kind of curious, like what percentage of the pan was in each ear, and like who kind of chose to that direction.
So yeah, I mean that brings up that we recorded some of those extra parts at the house, but we didn't mix or master this, which was, I mean, really the crucial aspect of making this sound professional in my mind. So we
Okay.
sent it off to Sam Skinner, who you know, was a very big deal that he responded to me. He is one of the guitarists in Pine Grove and has
Oh,
mixed all of their
awesome.
records.
Dang.
Um,
Yeah, that's a big deal.
yeah, very big deal. They're one of my like absolute favorite bands currently. So that would be a that would be a question for him, the exact percentage. But I think in general we do tend toward like having guitars panned, like 75% or whatever,
Yeah.
um, to really like accentuate the counter melody.
Yeah. How did you guys discover that? Like, was that just a like? Because I know for a fact I've heard it a bunch of times before, but I feel like it was very clear, and it's probably because of. I mean, I'm listening closer because I'm obviously getting you guys on the podcast, so I'm going to talk to you more about it, right? So that's probably the main reason I noticed it more. But like, when did you guys like think through and say, this would actually be a really good way of doing this since these two melodies are different from one another, but they have very similar tones and direction obviously the same. Let's put them into two separate sides and have it become one. I don't know how to even explain that necessarily.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of there's I don't think it's like a revolutionary decision. I think is what I'm getting at. I think there's a lot of like in the tradition of like the like sort of genres that we
Oh,
play
okay.
in, like two guitar, bass, and drums. It's not unheard of to have guitars panned. You know, unless you have lead and then like chords, you might have the lead like delayed to like space out the full breadth.
Yeah,
But
just a tiny delay.
in my mind, it's pretty familiar to have guitars, especially if they're both doing something like more active like that.
Yeah.
Um, to have them kind of occupy their own space
Yeah.
like that.
It was I mean, it does definitely feel more full because of it, right? Like it does feel like they they have their own place and they aren't fighting one another, which is really awesome. I think that makes a lot of sense. And are you're playing some of those guitar parts while singing?
Yes,
That's insane. That's so impressive.
some more
Cuz
successfully than others.
cuz like some of those guitar parts I'm like listening, I'm like I was like, they've got to have just a dedicated vocalist and then guitarist. And then I obviously, that was my first playthrough. And then I go and I check out the band's website and the page, and I'm like, okay, no, there's only two guitarists, and there's one of them is a vocalist, like the lead vocalist. Okay, this is pretty intense. And like, how like when you're doing that, how is that when you're doing it in the recording, obviously, are you doing it live that time too, like guitar and singing at the same time? No?
Oh no, oh no,
Okay.
no. Those vocals. I mean, there are songs where I did, you know, probably 100 takes of a lead vocal, like just being
Okay.
very, very uh
Meticulous?
perfectionist about
Okay.
that. Yeah. I'll also say the crazy wacky parts, the like the most adept parts that you hear are not me. Those are Drew. Just to set the record straight. Um yeah.
But I mean, even still though, the other parts, because I assumed that as well. I was like, once I figured that out, I was like, okay, I'm assuming the ones that are much more movement, much more going on, that's gonna be Drew. But even the other parts are still pretty darn intricate compared to, what I could do, which is strum while singing, right? Like that's
Yeah,
a
I'm just trying to keep up with Drew, really.
how long you guys been playing guitar?
Like in total, like individually or
Yeah,
together?
individually. Yeah, individually.
I started when I was about 15. I'm 29.
Okay.
I started at 11 and I'm 20. Shit, I'm 28 this year. Yeah, so it's almost 17 years. Yeah.
Dude, that's amazing. And before like Nocturnal Broadcast, had you guys played in other bands and stuff as well?
I had played in, I played in a band in college that was like sort of folk rocky with some friends of mine. We weren't very good. It wasn't very good.
What about you, Drew?
I mean, when I like first started playing guitar, I, of course, first idea was like, oh, let's make a little band. And so, like middle school band. And then no, I didn't play anything. And then I actually like went to school and studied music and didn't play with anybody for, the whole time I was there. And then it wasn't until after getting out of music school that my fiance, who's actually the bassist, Annie,
Oh, awesome.
she's the bassist in Nocturnal Broadcast. She was already in this band and in another band that at the time was called Mr. Owl. They had to change their name for obvious reasons. Moved over to Wise Birds. And when I moved down here to Baton Rouge, I moved back down here after college. I joined and started playing with them. But yeah, I had never, like, I'd played maybe, a little open mic night once or twice, but never really played in front of people. This was kind of the, the thing was like I was putting myself out there.
Dang. They don't require like performance in front of your peers and stuff at the music schools?
I mean, yeah, but I was playing saxophone. It wasn't me, studying the guitar. Yeah, it was the whole classical, that whole classically trained thing going on.
That's awesome. And dude, like, so did you start on saxophone, or did you start on like clarinet?
Yeah, that was actually the instrument that I started out on in band. I actually started saxophone the year I got my guitar and just kind of ran with it from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, my parents made me start on the clarinet in order to get a saxophone. They're like, "No, you got to learn on the clarinet first." So I ended up playing saxophone very late and didn't end up sticking with it because I was kind of burned out on kind of the orchestra side of things.
I feel that. Yeah, we're actually all like, we all have that same sort of similar. Annie, started playing bass in like elementary school, right? And
She's stellar, by the way. Holy crap.
She's very, very she's like the bedrock. And she majored in bass music education, and bass was
That's
her
awesome.
instrument. And then Taylor was, I think, an art major, and he played clarinet growing up, and he is probably the most like multi-instrumentalist of all of us, and like probably the most like underutilized too. It's a little infuriating to be the second best vocalist in the band where you're the lead vocalist.
Oh man.
I'm constantly reminded of it when we do sound checks, and I'm like, I check my mic, and then Taylor goes, and it's just like the most heavenly sound I've ever heard.
Oh, dude. Yeah, man. I'm very curious. So are you, sounds like all of you are obviously classically trained in music, as like music theory and kind of the okay. And was this just something that kind of came to you guys, your guys' family's musical, or was it kind of just like, I just have loved music and I'm gonna pursue this and I'm gonna make this thing my life?
I mean, speaking for myself, there's some smattering of like artistic ability, but there's definitely no like nepotism of artists or like musical genius in my family.
Yeah.
It was really just like my mom was like, all right, all my kids, you have to be doing a sport, you have to do a musical instrument just to keep you well rounded. And
That's my mom.
yeah, and honestly, like music was always just a central part of my life, just like socially and privately. And I stumbled upon like music theory in college. Music was not what I was intending to do, but like really latched on to the sort of more mathematical side of things, just like
Oh, cool.
seeing the order in music really.
Uh-huh.
And that helped me like appreciate and understand it a lot better. And then it was kind of game over.
That's fascinating. That's such a different side of it, because a lot of people, that's the side, the order and understanding of the kind of the structure of the music is typically comes after learning that they just really enjoy music. So that's kind
like
of
the more
cool.
daunting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just talked about this maybe like 3 nights ago or something, the band
Oh, really?
at rehearsal. Yeah, we just had this conversation.
That's awesome though, man. And Drew, you like for you was you shook your head kind of adamantly
Yeah, I
when
was
I
gonna
was like, "Is
say
your family musical?"
my my dad, like we've always kind of messed around with the fact that like he can't keep steady rhythm whatsoever. My mom was always an artist, and like she always kind of encouraged that with with me growing up. For me it was just I was a huge band nerd. Like I played in band. I now teach band to
Oh,
elementary school
awesome.
kids. So I mean it's one of those things where like I grew up loving that side of music, and then also played guitar. And that was actually kind of my thing with it, was I, as a guitar player, as someone who was interested in outside music, like stuff outside of, when I say that, like outside of the the school stuff, outside of
Yeah, yeah,
classical
yeah.
music realm. um that was kind of like my thing, is I I liked band and all that stuff growing up, but I didn't realize that like most of my music education as a kid was sitting alone in my room, like playing Green Day, playing Blink-182, learning songs on guitar from tabs, and just like figuring all that stuff out. And then I remember getting to college and being like, wow, like I didn't realize that I learned theory through this instrument that I just had fun doing. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't my school, it wasn't my homework.
So were you self-taught on guitar?
No, I took lessons
Oh, okay.
for a year as well. Or
That's all. I
yeah,
mean,
about a
that's
year.
not long. A year isn't that long, but
Yeah, it's yeah, I think it's like a year or two, and then after that, it just became
My guitar.
yeah, just pretty much just sticking around with guitar tabs and just like learning it that way, and really, really focusing on that.
man, I that's so cool, man. And when you went to college, was teaching a top of mind type thing for you?
So I went, I went with that degree in mind. Like that was
Oh,
my
that's
degree,
awesome.
but it was not necessarily with the intent to teach. It was just like, oh, I want to get a music degree, and I want to have something that is safe, get something to teach with, like it's something I can get a job. And
Yeah.
funny enough, it ended up being one of those things where like I took a year after college where I was, or yeah, it's just a year where I was like, or no, two, where I was like, yeah, I couldn't. I was like, I don't really know if I want to do this. And then I got into it, and it's something that I've definitely like decided I really like doing. But yeah, going into it as like the safe job, and luckily it worked out for me.
Yeah, luckily you love it. Yeah, that's awesome. Is that how you met your wife?
Yes, actually, I met Annie through the music education program we were both in. She actually teaches at, now ends up teaching at the same school that we both work in. But
That's incredible, man. What a story. That's fun. I
oh
love
yeah.
that. And with with kind of the musical theory, you guys started, obviously you finished school. And how did that transition happen from not being in a band, just playing music in like the education world in school, to then starting Nocturnal Broadcast? How did that transition happen for you, Connor? Because like for it to be your first band, it's pretty stellar. Most people's first band, it's kind of a throwaway thing. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to forget about some of that stuff I've written.
I mean, I didn't say the name of technically the first band that I was in,
Oh,
but
touche.
I do appreciate it. No, I mean, at first it really was just a solo project, that was really like, I was going through some stuff after college, like a breakup, and just had graduated and didn't know what I was doing with my life, etc. And so there's a lot of like processing to do. And it was kind of just that moment of like, you know what, I'm gonna do that thing that I always wanted to do and was too scared to like commit to, which is like writing music, right? And
Yeah.
recording. And so I did that, and that's Nocturnal Broadcast. Self-titled was this like it's okay. It's fine, right? Like, really me working through musically some ideas.
Yeah.
And then like several years later, I, you know, had another batch written and was kind of aiming toward doing the same thing, and then realized like I'd be much better off getting other people who are more adept at these instruments to play with me, right?
Yeah.
Um, which is like that's how I found Annie first. I was like, hey, just come and record this. Like, learn these songs, record them with me. It's kind of all we're doing here. We did that for a while, that was for Pendulum Make, and then I knew Taylor a little bit. And one day he showed up at like a bar gig that I had playing covers, and he was like, "Hey, I really like your songs. Any chance you've been looking for a drummer or anything? I've been trying to find someone to drum for." I was like, "Yes, desperately. I've tried with several drummers. Please." So really, yeah, it was just sort of like organically and over a fairly long period of time that the band formed as a whole, and it was really under the pretense of like recording songs that I had already written and prepared. Um, and we played a few months together, and then Annie was like, "Yeah, my boyfriend is moving into town. He plays guitar." And I was like, "Great, let's see what he's got. Let's see if we can get a second
That could have
guitarist
been
in
really
here."
awkward. He's like,
Yeah,
he's not super
absolutely.
great. You're like, oh.
He's okay. He
Oh,
just has like 3 Boss metal zones on his pedal board.
yeah. Could you imagine? That'd be such an awkward, like, well, Annie, we definitely want you to stick around for sure. Oh, that's awesome. Man, that's a big that is a big jump because I talk about this a lot when it comes to writing music, that vulnerability, kind of breaking down that barrier between kind of the subconscious and the emotional side and like your regular everyday life. And when you started writing music, what was it that you noticed like most when you first started writing music? Because obviously you said you were going through quite a bit, but like what was it you noticed most when you first started writing?
What do you mean? What did I notice?
Like the with yourself, like what were you learning the most, I guess, like as you started writing? Did you I don't even know how to even word it necessarily because the words kind of escape me because it's basically, that there is so much that happens when you finally start putting pen to paper and so many emotions kind of start flooding. You start kind of getting to know yourself better. You start getting to know kind of the world around you a little bit better sometimes. I'm just kind of curious kind of how it happened for you.
For sure. I think so. I think if you were to sort of interrogate the lyrics a little bit of Nocturnal Broadcast songs, a lot of time, um, it doesn't have the sort of like storytelling plot aspect to it that um, that I think of when I think of like Bob Dylan or Dolly Parton, right? The tradition
Yeah.
of just like storytelling in song.
Yeah. Kind of folk
I
Americana type thing.
Right. I for whatever reason gravitate more towards like just introspection, but also it's a lot of just like unanswered questions in many ways. So it's kind of hard to put a point on like what I've learned necessarily, but I think um, if you were to investigate lyrics, you would at least you would see the sort of like questions that I was like asking
Yeah.
myself, or just like throwing out into the world, like what is the deal with this thing, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
everyone sees this or feels this, right? Like what are we? So I think it is a lot of that and a lot of like snapshots of emotion.
Hmm.
Um, that's the best. That's the best I can
No, I
do.
love it. Now, like I said, for me, it was kind of like it was a question that came to my mind because a lot of times, when I talk to people, they've been writing music since they were 12, 13, 14 years old, and they've just kind of evolved the process over time. And it's just kind of been a part of who they are from the beginning. But for someone to to be as talented as you and making music like you do, to start so late and kind of take that leap, it's a bit different. And so that's why I was curious, because that's I feel like, obviously songwriting is a version of journaling, and it's so important to kind of get those things out of your head. You know what I mean? To just
Yeah.
kind of purge yourself of some of that stuff, those questions, those frustrations, those confusions. It's so important to get that out into the world, because you can kind of get clarity that way.
Well, yeah, and I think like purge is like a pretty good word to use too, because in a lot of cases, the topics or like the ideas that I was sort of like ruminating on were just like things that, you know, maybe were just like driving me crazy a little bit. And in many ways
Yeah.
it's like in writing it down, right? And into turning it into this other thing that is like a song, right? It
Yeah.
then becomes its own entity and it's outside of me in many ways, right? And so I can kind of like give it its like own mass and matter
Yeah.
elsewhere apart from me, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good way of putting it, because that's obviously one of my favorite things about music is it's very special to the writer, but it's also special in a completely different way to the listener, right? Like it's something that can be shared mutually, but have completely different meanings to everyone who listens to it. Um, and that's
yeah,
pretty magical.
I think of people like Phoebe Bridgers, who like there's something very comforting and something very universal in their like specificity, right?
Mhm.
Their like individual experience, for whatever reason, their ability to like articulate that almost makes the like experience for the listener more universal.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but I've always connected with people being like um, more and more granular about their particular experience, you know?
Yeah. I mean, for yourself, like, as you continue writing, do you find yourself kind of gravitating to that individually as well as you write your songs? Since that's something you resonate with other musicians?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always been sort of a natural. Um, I've always gravitated towards that,
Oh,
just
okay.
writing like the introspection and like, um, you know, trying to really like investigate uh, whatever it is, the topic that I'm sort of dealing with, and like what that means for me, or whoever it is.
That's awesome. And when you're putting these songs out, you're writing things and putting them all together, um, how do you decide, like, because you obviously threw away a lot of not threw away. You put them to the side for this album, right? There's the 8 songs that made it to the album, the other songs that didn't make the cut. Um, they
None.
obviously still have meaning to you. Wrote them. You planned on recording them, planned on doing more with them. But like when you're writing these songs, do you ever take pieces from previous songs and kind of puzzle piece them into new music?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. There there are definitely Insomnia comes back to mind, where it's just like, to me, it's like a Frankenstein of a song,
Oh, awesome.
where it really does have like, um, almost very distinct parts, um, in its like movements almost,
Mhm.
where, you know, I I can't remember specifically, but I would wager a guess that I did not write that front to back saying like this is how this section will transition to the next. They were almost definitely distinct ideas that I thought, oh, if I move this capo down too, it would fit very well with this other thing
Mhm.
that I have written that I don't know what to do with.
I actually noticed that with a few of the songs where you could tell there was kind of an act 1, act 2, act 3 to the song, which I loved. I thought it was really cool. I think Insomnia was the one that stood out most. My favorite though is Recidivism. That's my favorite song on the album. Uh, I think it's just kind of the whole thing, the kind of the whole feeling of that one. It was just kind of had the right vibe for me. But I mean, it's for you guys. I would imagine, Connor, you're like it's probably hard to say, but because they're all your baby, right? But is Insomnia your favorite of the songs on the album?
There's a lot that I like about it. I think Snowed In might be my favorite. Um, I think from like a songwriting perspective, for me, it it toes the line well of having enough like interesting nuance stuff to it without being too like far out in its too like frenetic in its like macro scale, which is sort
Yeah.
of how I view Insomnia, which is like I like it. It's fun to play. I appreciate it for what it is, but I also recognize that it's like kind of a lot from like a songwriting perspective,
Yeah.
not like a complaint levied against it. I just think Snowed In sort of toes the line well of like and I yeah. So I think currently that's the one that I think feels the most like professional too.
Yeah. I like that one. What about you? What's your favorite, bro?
I mean, depending on like if I'm thinking, like technically, like if I'm thinking like technicality of playing, yes, Insomnia is definitely one of the really, really fun ones because it's got just some of the biggest riffy bits in it that we just, really like threw in just so many in there for that particular song. But I'd have to agree that Snowed In was one of the big tracks that just stood out. A lot of it even came from even in practice. I remember like just like the writing of that song when we were working on it together. I remember just how naturally the song kind of came together, and there were just like spots that we were working on, and it was just like we didn't stop and say, "Oh, hey, let's do this thing." It was just like, boom, it happened, and we were
Yeah.
like, "Holy crap!" Like that's gonna be like that's the next part. We have to like, what did we just do there? We have to remember, try to
Yeah.
remember what we just played and redo it. But yeah, like there were little spots like that it just really, really gelled together. And I don't know if that Snowed In was just one of the song that kind of I feel like stood out from recording, practice wise, just songwriting, like you said. But technicality stuff, Insomnia. And then if I'm thinking when I want to just chill and vibe out on it, Good Days is so much fun because I'm sitting there literally on the floor just twisting knobs all day, making different sounds on my guitar. So
That's awesome. And I'm like, I think Snowed In was the best way to start the album. Like it comes out so perfectly, just kind of leading you into this journey, right? But I'm curious, one of the things that really just stands out to me is the cohesiveness while everyone is doing so much. I'm so curious how you guys balance that, because you've got Taylor on the drums doing a lot of fills and a lot of things. He's not just, hi-hat, snare, bass, right? He's all over the place. Then always got Annie over there on the bass doing the same thing, where she's 5 strings, 6 string. I don't know how many strings her bass is, but she's obviously using
5-string fretless.
yeah, she's using it all, right? Like she's using the full bass. And then obviously you two guys, how do you guys balance that to make it cohesive? Because I feel like that's so difficult.
I know at least on my part, just as being somebody who sometimes it's, or oftentimes it's Connor bringing an idea to it. One thing that, does get brought up to us sometimes is it's like, all right, sometimes we have to, give somebody some room, like there's one of us needs to, have a little bit more than the other, or we need to find something that isn't, too much. And there's definitely some talks where we have, where we're working on something and one of us, I mean, not just, Connor as being the songwriter, just one of us will be like, hey, that's stepping on like this part, or maybe it's given it like this, different feel that we weren't really feeling our part with as well. And and so there is a little bit of that just like discussion. And sometimes it does turn into little arguments every now and then, but that we always get them resolved.
Well,
I
yeah.
mean, I guess Connor can, also probably have plenty to add to it.
I think I would mostly just say thank you. I'm glad that it comes across that we're it's not just like chaos.
Oh
Because
no,
that is
it's amazing. I'm genuinely just like I listen to it and I'm like nothing is overburdening someone else, but it all just feels like it fits. And I was just like, how does it fit? Because I kept listening to it. I was like, how does this fit together when there's so much going on? How does it not sound overdone? And I couldn't put words to it. It's really cool. I think it's really impressive.
I think so. In an attempt to actually answer it, I think a lot of it does have to do with Annie and Taylor. They could probably, if they were here, could probably speak on that a lot more. But um, it's very common for in rehearsal, especially when we're learning or writing, or just like jamming on a song or idea, for them to be like locked in with each other, and be like, "Hey, what are you doing for that part? Let me try to
Mhm.
match with you," or like, "Hey, let's try this together." And because I think that's natural too for me and Drew to be like, "Hey, we got to make sure like we are not just like in our completely own worlds here, and like
Yeah.
make sure that like what we're doing makes sense together, right? Because it could make sense
Yeah.
on your own." But yeah, I think Annie and Taylor like they lock in together so well that it's almost like we could do whatever we wanted on top of that. Like, obviously not to that extent, but like that is how it feels sometimes, because they're like so solid and together and like have the fundamentals of the song laid down
Yeah.
in such a way that like we do have the freedom to like move about. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's
It
definitely them.
obviously helps that all of you guys are trained to have understood how all that goes together, and obviously where you're coming from, Connor, where it's like all of the kind of the math side of it. You're putting these things together almost mathematically compared to someone who's putting it together musically. That mathematical side, you're constantly balancing things out, right? In your mind, is that how your mind works when it comes to this stuff?
I so I make a very concerted effort to like not write with that knowledge in mind, with like
Oh, okay.
theory knowledge in mind. Um, because in my experience, songs that I've written before, it doesn't necessarily turn out very well. Uh, um, so I do my best to learn those, to learn those ways of analyzing music. And then when I go to write, to forget them, right? Um,
Interesting.
so like very much like playing in the moment, playing what feels right and sounds good. And then like maybe in the editing stage, I will say like, oh, it would be cool to like move to the major six chord here instead of the minor six. To like,
Yeah.
those decisions can happen afterward. But I do, and this is something I've had to like learn over time. It's a lot better to um, use that as a like descriptive tool instead of a prescriptive tool in like
Okay.
music writing.
And why is that? Like, from your opinion, why is it better to use it later on and kind of have it in your mind, but kind of not reference it when writing? Why is it so important?
Um, I think it is for like the quality of the song, which is like a very subjective thing, right?
Absolutely.
Um, but in my mind, I'll speak for myself. I can get very caught up in like um utilizing techniques and like modal interchanges and metric modulations and all of this stuff. And like, sure, you might have used very cool things, but like as a song, does it sound good, right? Is it enjoyable to listen to? Like those are the things that are a little more ephemeral and not those are not math equations that you can solve, right? I think
Yeah,
is like ultimately what it is. Um,
that's cool.
so yeah, it's very like for me, I find it enjoyable to like analyze things in that way, but it's not helpful to write music.
doesn't
I had to
benefit the
learn
song
the
that
hard
way.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because that's one thing that I've always been curious about, not having been a, I didn't study music. I'm business major, so I kind of went the complete different direction out of the creative side, right? But I've always been curious about that because I feel like music theory, it has very specific principles and almost laws that are like in place, right? It's like this is how things are supposed to be done. This is how, and then especially when you start getting into the more mainstream music, it's like, hey, this is how long the intro should be. This is how long it should be before you get to the chorus. There's very like you said, prescriptive things. It's like this is how it works. You have to write it this way, and I feel like that would be very hindering on the creative side, like being able to think freely and come up with something that's not so cookie cutter. And so it makes sense the way that you explained it. That's really awesome because it kind of answers that question that I've always had, like how do you balance that theory with like the writing and actually keeping it creative. That's awesome, man. Um
Thanks.
and one more quick question with regards to the album. Um it's not just this album, it's actually all of the singles you released and everything so far too. Is the album art is very cool, very unique, obvious, with kind of the infinite shape shrinking into itself. Basically, you started out with kind of a non-geometric shape and then went to the square, to the circle, and then another circle. What's the meaning behind that, if any?
Yeah. So, um, I mean, Monomania has a focus on like shouting into the void, right? And like um, a lot of like existential sort of thoughts about like, you know, both this idea of void and like how you're perceived by people, etc. I think we wanted to like really lean into that like feeling of not just the void, but a lot of this album. Bleak is not necessarily the right word, um, but I don't know. I don't know. Drew, do you have any like better way to attack this? Um,
I mean, yeah, I would say I think a lot of it was, at least in my mind, with the way I saw the artwork kind of coming out with it, a lot of it being, concentric circles or concentric squares like we had with Lavender, or the whatever freeform shape we had for, was that Good Days? Yeah.
For Good Days, yeah.
Yeah, those it was kind of like you said, staring into a void, kind of something that, it just continually sinks. Especially was interesting with, the animation that was able to be done to that one.
Yeah.
For Good Days, it definitely kind of helped bring that, idea of it to life.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I kind of shouts to Ari Ross for taking care of that artwork for us, one of our good friends here in Baton Rouge, who just put in, he sent us a lot of different stuff that we had to peer through and kind of figure out, how is this exactly what we want. I mean, sometimes it was even, something is just as picky as like, oh no, that one circle is like a little bit too big, and it makes it just look not void enough.
Yeah. Because that was the other part that I noticed, was it wasn't the typical, exact size reduction each time, right? It was variable, and that was a part of it too. I was like, there's a reason for the randomness. There's a reason, and so I was just curious because I feel like I feel like the album art, it I don't know, it's really really, it's something I haven't seen really a whole lot in terms of album art, and I really enjoyed it. It's like it just is really catchy, and so that's really awesome.
yeah, I think in thinking back to it too, I think actually everyone really liked the idea of leaning into something surreal, right? And so I think
Yeah.
like this like geometric manipulation of what is very clearly like a landscape, like a natural formation on Earth. I think that lent itself to, for whatever reason, what we felt like was the right sort of representation of this music.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I love it. It just kind of pulls the whole thing together. But man, if you guys, obviously I know I started late, so I apologize. But if you guys still have a couple minutes, I always love to end my podcast on just really random, nothing to do with music questions. All right, cool. First one here is since I'm a sugarholic, I eat way too much candy. What is your guys' favorite, either candy or dessert or both, whichever, you know?
I've been going pretty hard on some dark chocolate Milky Ways.
Oh, nice. Dude, Milky Ways are
I don't even know
great,
if it's my favorite, but I definitely love like dark chocolate anything.
man. Okay. Dark chocolate, anything.
Yeah, I'd have to probably say like Heath Bar. Really like that.
Wow.
Chocolate and toffee.
Dude, that's a great candy. Totally underrated, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Great in milkshakes for sure. All right, next one here for you. Favorite movie, and obviously, you know, if you can't come up with your top number one movie, you can come up with your top three. I'll allow that too. So,
I'm gonna pass this to Connor first because I'm a horrible movie person. I fall asleep through every movie.
oh, for real?
Annie can attest to it. I can we were talking about this actually, like can binge watch TV shows all day. But as soon as a movie passes 90 minutes, I'm out. Like, no way.
Oh, dang.
But I don't know. I'd have to maybe say, oof, kind of like a pretty bad. Like, I guess, like, yeah, I just
I mean,
completely,
I'll accept TV shows then. If you can watch TV shows without any issues, well, you know, maybe we'll do your top 3 TV
okay.
series.
Let's see. I really like cartoons still. So of course, you know, got to throw out one of the best cartoons of all time, SpongeBob.
Oh,
Throwing it out
dude,
there.
watching that with my kids all the time still, man. They turn that on all the time.
Then let's see. After that, Breaking Bad, great show.
Bit of a leap, yeah.
And then
SpongeBob's Breaking Bad.
and then here we go. We got, you know, we got Bryan Cranston on the complete opposite end, Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh man,
one of the best sitcoms.
Throwback. Dude, that's a good one.
There's some free TV shows. I guess if Connor wants to do TV shows or movies, he can
yeah, he can choose now.
Man, this is exact. I'm going to be on the drive home. I'm at Drew's house. I'm going to be on the drive home and I'm going to have about a dozen ideas where I was like, that's what I should have said. Because my mind is blank right now.
I hate, dude. That's the funny part about doing this series at the end of the podcast, right? Because it's totally out of left field. And I hate being the person on the spot, but I love being the person putting others on the spot. So
for sure. No, I'm totally panicking. Okay, but what I have thought of does not technically qualify as a movie or a TV show, but I'm going to say it because it's all that I have on my mind. I, in the last several years, have been a very big fan of a group that streams D&D.
okay.
A Critical Role.
Yep.
So
biggest Twitch channel on biggest Twitch channel, and they're freaking huge on YouTube too.
Yeah, I've been watching them for like 5 years, and I mean, it's just great. It's very good. It's like it scratches the itch of like, you know, it's a fantasy setting, but it's improv, right?
Yeah.
It's like professionals doing improv, and it also has the nitty gritty of like a game with like dice and randomness. It's just great. It's all of it.
I love it, dude. Yeah, I've been told to watch that a bunch of times because I've
talked about time investment.
I've never played D&D, but I talked to a band. They were like, yeah, we just barely finished a 2.5 year, like,
yeah,
what is it called? Is it a quest? Not a quest, campaign. And I was like, 2.5 years. They're like, yeah, every Friday or Saturday or whatever it was for 2.5 years, they would every Friday or Saturday. I was like, dang, that is quite the commitment.
It's a good time. It's a good time for like improv.
That's awesome. Do you play as well then?
Yeah, I actually run it. I am the DM of a game that Taylor, our
And for those
drummer,
who don't know, that's a dungeon master,
is the
right?
dungeon master, which is
Yes.
a pair of words that I didn't want to have to say out loud. But
Hey,
yes,
you have to own it, man.
I do have to
Be
own it.
proud.
Uh,
Be proud.
yeah, this is Taylor's first time playing D&D. Didn't really know how it worked at all. Our drummer, and so he's playing in my game with a few of our friends, including Ari, actually,
That's
the
so
artist.
cool.
So yeah, we've been playing a game for several months.
That's so
Um,
cool.
yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah,
What else
my
you got?
wife, she'll still make fun of me because I'm like, "I need to try that," but all the friends my friends who do it are further away, so I've still gotta try and figure out a way to coordinate with them to do dungeon and I kinda just gotta figure out
Yeah,
a way to do it. Alright, last question here for you guys. Obviously music is huge in both your lives, so this one's, always fun. What's your favorite non-music related hobby? Something that you like to do that has nothing to do with music?
I will say, as of late, and this sort of toes the line of like a hobby and like something more professional because I am in the process of trying to get a job as like a software developer. But in general, like I I get a lot of enjoyment of like creating things software wise.
Heck
Um,
yeah.
because it again, my elevator pitch for that is always like it is the perfect like crossroads of a rigid logic strict system, right? Like
Mhm.
you're dealing with ones and zeros ultimately, but
Yeah.
also like creative problem solving, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that really scratches that creative itch for me too.
That's awesome. What language have you been developing in?
uh i I entered with Python. So Python always
Nice.
has a special place in my heart, but um, like JavaScript is like really what people use ultimately, and um, so I have come to use a lot more with like Vue and Node and React and all that, and then some like Flutter, which is Google's mobile language too.
Yeah. Yeah, Flutter's interesting. That's what I do for a career now is, I got a
Awesome.
degree in business and I jumped ship because I was in sales for too long. I was like, "I'm out of here." So I went and did a software boot camp, and that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'll put some feelers out looking for a job all and because I've got a lot of connections in the industry now, and obviously everything's remote, so we'll figure something out.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. What about you, Drew? Favorite
Um,
non-music hobby, bro?
so I have some pretty basic bro hobbies. I totally I'm in a I'm in a disc golf league called the Whiskey Discs.
Nice.
And so I go to a putting league every Thursday and play a lot of disc golf. And then with that, also craft beer trading. So yeah, I like to
Trading?
package and ship beer um, through ways that are undisclosed. Uh, and send them around the country to other people who are just as nerdy about it as me. And
Wow.
yeah,
So this is just like how did you find a group of people to randomly just
um,
like
Instagram, social media stuff. Just
the
you
internet's
get on
amazing.
there. Yeah, you get on there, you find people who they put out like, oh, I want this, like, oh, I have that, and then they tell you what they have, and
It's like I grew up trading cards, now I trade beer.
yeah, pretty much.
That's incredible. So this is something that I've never figured out. What are the differences between the different discs? Because to me, I've thrown them all and they feel the exact same, except maybe
Uh,
weight. Some of them are lighter, but I'm like,
so
they all
so
feel
you've
the same
got
to me.
Yeah, so you've got your drivers, which are going to be shaped more like a saucer, I get, or like like a sharper edge. There's supposed
Okay.
to be something you can throw farther, but you also have to like have the arm to throw it farther. Um, you have mid ranges, things like that are obviously mid range. It's closer to a frisbee, like halfway between driver and frisbee, and then you got a putter, which is going to be probably the heaviest one, and it's mostly about how stable they are.
It's got to sink into those chains, man.
Yeah. It's mostly just about like if you throw a driver really really soft, it's just gonna plant right into the ground. But like a putter, you can kind of just toss and it can still go 40, 50 feet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There we go, man. The TLDR of disc golf. Like I said, I've seen quite a few different disc golf places around me, and I'm like, seems like a cool sport. I don't know anything about it, but it seems cool. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's a good way to enjoy the woods and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you guys got beautiful terrain out there in Baton Rouge. Like I've stopped there, but I haven't actually like stayed there. But I've driven through because I was in Houston. I lived in Houston for a while and took I-10 all the way through to South Carolina a couple times because that's where my sister-in-law lived. Man, it's absolutely gorgeous over where you guys are at, man.
Thank you.
Real quick, what's that bridge that's absolutely terrifying? That I-10 bridge that's like forever long and
the Atchafalaya Basin Bridge. Yeah, the one that if you get stuck on it or run out of gas, you're stuck for like 70 miles. Like, I don't know, 40 miles, something ridiculous.
Yeah, that thing sketched me out because I was stuck in rush hour traffic on that bridge, and I was sketched out of my mind. Crazy. Awesome, man. Thank you guys so much for joining me. It was an absolute pleasure getting to know you guys. And I want to just one more time reiterate, stellar job on the album. Congratulations on the release, obviously. And I'm looking forward to seeing where things go, because it was a lot of fun to talk with you guys and obviously get to listen to your music. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for checking us out. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, man. Maybe sometime in the future, maybe for the next one, we'll get the whole band in here to talk.
Oh, that'd be stellar, man. That'd be so much fun, because then we can obviously hear what you're talking about with Annie and Taylor, how they lay that nice foundation for you guys. We'll talk about that stuff.
Yeah, so we could just go wake up Annie right now in the other room if we wanted to.
No, I'm not gonna be in trouble for that.
You don't want that. Cool, man. Yeah, thank you for having us. This has been fun.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Have a good one.
All right, take care.
Take care. Awesome. What cool dudes, and what a cool interview, man. It was a lot of fun talking to those guys. Obviously, be sure to check out their album Null. I mean, I'll reiterate what I said at the beginning. It just brings me on that journey all the way from way back in the day. I was listening to a lot of indie and a lot of music like that, where it was the Shins and the Steelwells and Yo La Tango and the Decemberists. There's that vibe that they just encapsulate, and they do super well. And they've added a nice flair to it that just changed everything for me. So super awesome. Check them out. And thank you so much for listening. Catch you next time. Deuces.